Hello, I'm doing this review right now in an empty lecture hall at my university because I have a 4.5 hour break and I got nothing else to do. So, as requested, import export. So, import export is a film and it's an Austrian film, but also it takes place in both Austria and the Ukraine. And it's pretty much about the divide between Eastern and Western Europe. And what it's about is there's two separate stories pretty much, and they don't intertwine, but they have a similar theme. And one of those stories is the story where a Ukrainian woman goes to Austria in hopes of finding a better life. And another story is about an Austrian man doing pretty much the same thing. And the film director has talked about this film. You can see a short video of that on YouTube, and he said that he pretty much discovered that the geographical boundaries aren't as important as he thought they would be when making this film. So he tried to put an emphasis on the social boundaries and how people identify as an Eastern European versus a Western European. Before watching this film, I had no clue that there was that much of a difference. Now that I think of it, I think of all the touristy destinations in Europe that I would like to go, and they pretty much all seem to fall under Western Europe, such as Italy, Austria, which is the country which the film director is from, France, a whole slew of countries, and then there's the other countries which aren't really tourist destinations like Ukraine. And one of the major reasons why there is this divide in lifestyle and quality of life is because a lot of Eastern European countries were former communist countries, and communism pretty much did a big blow to those countries' economy and everything. It's shot in documentary style. There's many long shots, and it's kind of used to give an intimacy to a scene. It allows one to be immersed in a scene before you cut to another scene or another character. And once you make that cut, you're reminded that you're watching a movie, or so film theorists kind of put it, that lots of cuts are kind of like trying to remind you that you're watching a movie, while when you're just watching a long, continuous shot, you just kind of get immersed into the scene, and it just flows by you. And the reason why this film is often criticized is because the content of some of these scenes with these long shots is very graphic, sexually graphic. And the film director, he speaks about this too. He says that his intent is to show the truth, which is pretty much what documentary films do. So, kind of like this reminded me of Werner Herzog, how even in his actual documentary films, he would change the situation around so that he would get certain shots of things, and in his mind, he was showing the truth, even though it didn't happen before him like that on camera. So that's kind of what Werner Herzog does, what this guy is doing, and I'm sorry, but I can't remember his name, and I can't really pronounce it if I did. He's trying to show the truth even though it's fictional, he's trying to show the truth through that fiction, like Werner Herzog was trying to do. And unlike actual documentaries, the thing about fiction is that you can get deeper into the truth because you can get into and show people's private lives. And that's exactly what this film does, with a number of controversial sex scenes which go on for much longer than comfortable. And the reason why these particular scenes are going on for a very long time is because the audience needs this time to kind of let it sink in and form their opinions about what is happening. At least that's what the filmmaker says. Now, the issue I take with this is that by making certain scenes have a very long duration, it's kind of having a bias towards what you're supposed to be feeling. You're supposed to be feeling uncomfortable. You know that the filmmaker wants you to feel uncomfortable during these scenes. But, and he says that you're supposed to form your own opinion, that's why it's of a long duration. But just by having it as a long duration, it kind of shows what the filmmaker's intentions were. So you really can't get to this objective viewing of a film. There's always this subjective voice of the film director or film writer or whoever is constructing the scene and how they want the scene to look and feel. So this film, I have to admit, it took me a while to get into it. It's very slow, like a lot of Werner Herzog films are very slow, And usually I can watch these films and I can appreciate them and I can kind of get hypnotized by them. But for this film, it was a little bit difficult to get into. And I think something that attributes to that is its length. It's 2 hours and 30 minutes long, and it's a very slow pace. Like, I can get hypnotized by a slow-paced film and kind of watch it and get absorbed in the scenes if it's at a shorter length. 2 hours and 30 minutes is pushing it for me. And I actually didn't watch this all in one sitting. I watched it in chunks, which was not exactly because I wanted to. It was kind of out of necessity because I had to do something else and I couldn't finish watching the movie. So it did take me a while to get into it, but I did enjoy it after all. But I would enjoy something like, well, Werner Herzog is my favorite film director, so I keep on mentioning him. I would enjoy something more like something that Werner Herzog does, like Heart of Glass, which is a very slow, hypnotizing, in a sense, movie. But another thing about this is that it's not a beautiful movie. Werner Herzog films, even though sometimes they can be dark or depressing, they're usually very beautiful. This film is purposely ugly, if I must say so. And that's something that happens in a lot of films. A lot of digital filmmakers use digital films to get this ugly effect. One example is Casamig's Visitor Q, and that's an example where I think using digital film actually works quite well. So the opening shot of this film is of this man trying to start a motor on a snowblower, if I remember correctly. And I love this kind of start. And he's surrounded by this barren wasteland, pretty much. It's all white snow everywhere. And I think this is kind of symbolic about what I was saying before. This film never really starts. It just kind of brings you into the middle of these two very mundane lives, and events never really start to pick up or start to slow down. It just kind of stays at this steady pace, and it never starts. And I think I like that. I don't know if that symbolism is intended, but I liked how you see this guy trying to start a snowblower, and he's staring directly into the camera, and right away I thought of a Werner Herzog film. And both countries are introduced with outdoor shots, I might add, and they both kind of are barren lands. And like I said, I think this film is trying to show that these two countries are not as different, and these two people are not as different as you might think from this kind of division between Eastern and Western Germany. And both shots are outside and this barren landscape. In Ukraine, it's all snowy. In Austria, the first shot is of this rocky hillside place. And that first shot of Austria, I believe it's the first shot of Austria, is a very great scene in the movie, actually. It's this training sequence where the Austrian guy, Paul, is being trained to be a security officer. And it's a very interesting looking sequence filled with lots of energy, the most energetic moment, I guess you can say, of the film. Or a lot of Paul's storyline is much more energetic than Olga's, who is the Ukrainian woman who comes to Austria. Anyways, so like I said, in the Ukrainian outskirts, it's snowy, the air is filled with smog, and both characters pretty much leave people behind and become isolated in their new environment. Paul actually leaves with his stepfather, but he and his stepfather, they don't really understand each other. They don't really get along. He's not Paul's type of person. And the stepfather, when they're in Ukraine together, he actually tries to hook up with girls at these bars. He hires a prostitute, so he's cheating on Paul's mother, which obviously Paul doesn't like. And although, like I said, Austria is introduced with an outdoor shot, most of the shots are indoor and are rather claustrophobic. It's because in Austria, in Paul's storyline, he works in the subway, I believe, and you see shots of the dark claustrophobic corridors of the subway. While in Olga's storyline, when she goes to Austria, she works in this. She works as a cleaning lady in this old age. I don't know. I guess it's a hospice, maybe. And in contrast, of course, most of the shots of Ukraine are outdoor shots, and it's almost the opposite of claustrophobic. It's these huge outdoor spaces with nothing in sight for a long distance. And so, like I was talking about the sex scenes, and there's two really interesting scenes there that they really stick in your mind. So they definitely, the filmmaker definitely did a good job of that. And one scene is, like I said, Paul is kind of witnesses his father cheating on his mother, his stepfather cheating on his mother, that is. And there's a sequence when he's in a hotel with his stepfather, and he walks in on his stepfather and this prostitute there, and his stepfather proceeds to humiliate this woman, and there's this language barrier, so he tries to make her say things that she doesn't even understand what she's saying, and all that. And he's pretty much trying to teach Paul a lesson. He's trying to teach him that money can buy you everything. And it makes you really uncomfortable, and it makes you feel sympathetic for Paul, who doesn't really, who's kind of like forced to watch this show, this perverse show. Anyways, Olga's story is kind of, both of the stories are depressing, but Olga's, in my opinion, is a little bit more depressing. She's a single mother, and she can't care for her baby, and she can't care for her baby for her financial situation, and she's a nurse in Ukraine, so she goes to Austria. But before that, she actually tries to get a part-time job doing internet sex, phone calls. When she goes to Ukraine, she becomes a cleaning lady in this hospital with all these elderly people, and of course, that's not a very pleasant environment. She's kind of used to it because she used to be a nurse in Ukraine, and now she's a cleaning lady, which is kind of a blow that she moves to another country and she becomes a cleaning lady for the nurses. And at one point, she's actually combing the hair of this one elderly woman who wanted her hair combed, and the nurse kind of reprimands her, saying, "You shouldn't be doing that, that's not your job." She said, "I used to be a nurse in Ukraine." And the nurse says, "Well, that was in Ukraine, now you're in Austria." And so pretty much what her plan is to marry someone in Austria and pretty much be married for money and for status. And she actually agrees to marry an elderly man there, and just to keep him company. It's almost like a trade-off. So she keeps him company, and he could give her status as an Austrian citizen. There's lots of interesting scenes in this film, but like I said, it's not an enjoyable film. It wasn't supposed to be an enjoyable film, but I do appreciate the film, and it should be interesting to see what this director also has in his filmography. Though I believe this is his most famous film, or his masterpiece. So would I recommend it? Yeah, if you got this far in the review, you kind of know whether or not you'll like it. Like I said, it's slow, and if you don't like slow movies, then this isn't going to be the movie for you. But if you can handle these kind of slow-moving, more documentary-like pictures, and you like movies like that, definitely give it a shot. It's worth your while, though I do think it could have been trimmed down.
Vergisst, was nicht zu ändern ist. Sing, 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 sing.